Well, thank you, everyone, and please enjoy your meal while I stand up here hungry. I'm trying to not show much sadness today. As you know, Mr. Trump will build that wall. I kept thinking he may not, but he's moving forward to build it. The question is, and you could potentially start some website voting or something, where will Alfredo be, on the north side or the south side of the wall? So that's where the sadness comes from, I just don't want to be building it, that's what I know for sure, so. And then keeping me on the south side. Anyway, so it's good to see a really good program, a program that actually has increased over time, and I think, in my opinion, this is probably one of the largest ones we have had so far, so I'm glad you've stuck it out with us and that we've gotten to this point. I guess it's proof that we may do a few things right, perhaps not too many, but a few of them, and so I have to share with you a few thoughts on minimizing hay waste, and so we'll get started with that. The first few slides, I'm going to spend time trying to make the point that resources are expensive anymore for running cows, and where that came from, and that really came from increasing grain prices in the mid-2010 years. You can see corn very high there in 2013. These are the distillers' co-products from corn, or the ethanol co-products. And then so that created an incentive for us to repurpose land for corn production. So this is millions of acres since 2000 dedicated to planting corn. And the most recent number is about 95 million. You can see that even though prices have gone down for corn, or interest in dedicating corn acres has not faded too much. We're at 95 million, and the most recent time, I don't know what 17 is bringing. Quite possibly it's going to be relatively flat to the previous year. So these things have had an impact on forage land, forage production, and the cost of hay. This is the Nebraska composite price for hay, so that would be grass and alfalfa hay, from about 2003 to date. And you can see, don't worry about these are zero reports, so there was no, not to say that it didn't cost much for hay those years, or those days. This is a daily report coming out of Nebraska, so you can see the variation. This peak will represent 2012 when we had the drought. So for forage production, on top of corn prices and the impact on land for forage production, we also have the drought having an impact there. Now, if you add those two little brackets there, you can see the variability. So the brackets are supposed to represent from the most price to the least price for that given date. And you can see a narrow, smaller bracket back in 2007 and a larger, wider bracket in 2016, showing that the variability in prices for hay has increased dramatically. So some of you may buy a really good buy today, but then somebody else may have a poorer buy that same day at a different outlet. So keep in mind then that in addition to some of the things we're talking about, the price of hay is highly variable, and it hasn't really gone back. If you take the average of that figure, which would be somewhere around there, it's slightly higher than what we have seen pre-corn expansion time. So this all has led to increases in production costs of your cow-calf operations, beginning back in 1996 at a cost of $450 per cow to maintain a cow a year operating price, all the way to about $750 today. The blue little line running through there represents the proportion of the bar that goes to feed costs. That would include pasture as well. So for 2015, we have a cost of $750 to run a cow. And if you take 50% of that, or about $380, that would be what you're spending on feed. Now, if you take that value and back it up to 2001, you're spending for feed what you used to spend to keep an entire cow back then. That's only about 17 years ago. It's not really that long ago when you think about it, but the changes in agriculture have led to these dramatic changes in operating costs. So it's costing you about $300 a year just for harvested feeds to place in front of your cattle during the winter to keep that cow going into the next year. So keep that in mind. So to me, this says, what should we be doing on the farm to try and preserve the hay that takes so much expense, labor, equipment to put up? We need to think of it now in terms of how do we preserve it, how do we not waste what we have already made an effort to put in there. So today we're going to be talking about a little bit on the storage side of storing hay after it's harvested and before you feed it, and then obviously the delivery of hay itself. So this is perhaps not a good way to store hay, right? As we've done this tour, by the way, we're getting closer to this field, but still far. I don't think it's any of your guys' field. It's a little further east from here. But what I say though is it's probably okay. This person, you think that this person is not real smart, but he or she's smarter than you think, because those bales are actually wrapped in net wrap. So likely they're not getting wet, right? So the net wrap is keeping them nice and dry. In fact, they may be floating for all we know. I don't know. And so then there's this photo. I don't know if you can see it well. There's some cows just having free access to just a pile of hay, which may have been baled sometime prior to this photograph. But there is no structure. There is nothing. They're just being fed out in the open without any hay ring or anything like that. And then there's some deer that found a row of bales stacked long ago. This is an old photograph. An entire herd of deer that just found these bales, started eating away because it was a cold winter that I think it was in 97 or something like that. And then there is this structure which is supposed to hold silage within it. So there's some bales that were dedicated as bunker walls, if you will, but they too are falling apart as they're not holding anything. This is even farther than you from here. And this is one other example which also happens a lot, and it's a corn silage pile. And so you can see how bad it is to even get in there. As our thaw goes out in the spring, you get some mud, drive over it. Any spillage of silage or hay or whatever gets stomped into the ground. Of course, there's a lot of spoilage on the top, so lots of problems, and it costs a lot of money to put the silage up or to put the hay up, so we're going to talk a little bit about that. Hay that's been ground at a feedlot south and west of here can blow away in this situation, or it can actually be rained on as well. At this point I say, you know, we're at least not the only ones creating these types of problems for ourselves, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't do anything about it. So this is data from a survey that USDA conducts every 7 to 10 years. This is actually from feedlots. And they go to very specific feedlot states. So Texas, Kansas, Nebraska, Colorado are represented here. We're not, because we were not at that level of feedlot capacity at that time for them to pay attention to us. I think Iowa may be included in here. So what these bars indicate is the proportion of each of these feeds down here that is actually covered or protected at that particular feedlot. So let's not worry about corn. Hopefully about 90-some% or almost 90% of the corn is protected. It better be, right? Because it's expensive. But look at the hay. 63% of the feedlots that were surveyed do not have any protection on that hay. Now, if you're in western or eastern Colorado, probably not such a big problem. But if you're in eastern Nebraska, it's a serious problem, right? Because it rains about as much as it rains for us here. So we can fix this problem in many ways. I have people on campus saying, oh, I think we're going to have to study all the gene maps of all these creatures so we can fix things at a very sophisticated level and move farming forward. I go, hell no. We got 60-some% warp before we get to that point. It's too simple to go try and figure out what the little fly gene can do and some other little genome. But it's way, you can give me all you want. You can have the fanciest cow. But if I'm gonna mistreat her, it doesn't matter how good a gene she has. And I don't mean mistreat her as in beating her up, but in having a poor supply of feed for that critter is what I'm getting at. So a little bit on structures, or rather on storage. And this is just because I have a couple of slides that I put away just mainly because of the interest of time. It's a discussion on those slides that you don't have of what the cost of a structure would be to put up a hay barn and what that return would be. And in essence, it says that for about a 40 cow herd, an investment in the range of 40 to 60,000 will pay for itself in about 20 years when hay prices are at about $80 a ton. That's really a discussion that you should have with a financial institution, so because they're the ones that are going to fund your building, et cetera, et cetera. If you're not going to use a building and you're not going to use water underneath to store it, like that first photograph you saw, you can begin to look at putting these rows of bales in areas, locations that might preserve that hay a little better with a few minor strategies. The first one is this study back in 1990 where if you consider, and I put this new little arrow right here, it says axis. We're going to call that either the flat side or the axis side of that bale for the discussion right here. So if this axis is oriented to the north, so that point of that arrow is pointing north or south, it doesn't matter. Then the waste that was recorded was at about 14% on bales like that. If that axis now is east to west, so you just turned them, right? So instead of going that way, we're going this way. That loss is only about 10%. So a simple little storage change created a big difference. Now, as I go through these things, I see a question, I'll come back to that. As I go through these things, I don't want you to just say, well, that's dogma, this is it, that's the only way it's going to happen. No, because let's put it this way. If the only way you can store bales this way is in the middle of that lake, you shouldn't do it, right? I mean, so think about more than just what I'm saying, and you will come up with better strategies than we are proposing. Yes, sir?
Just question with bale roll directions.
Yeah.
I think if they're stored north-south,
Yeah.
in the wintertime, the sun rises from the east and sets to the west, and
Yeah.
the sun on all sides of them bales.
Right,
But
right.
if they're stored the other way,
Yeah.
it just doesn't, I'm not getting it.
Well, two things with that. The first one is the direction of the wind and the precipitation when it hits those bales. So if it's oriented north-south, we get north-northwest phenomena, or even southern phenomena as far as rain and snow in the winter. So you are covering, if you will, with the precipitation more of the row, whereas east-west, it's in essence just hitting that segment, if you will. So you're almost presenting the entire phase of the bales to the northerly winds is what that statement indicates. Now, and you might be wrong with the east-west. Does the sun really rise in the east in the winter? Southeast. So actually the south side of the bales is exposed to more sunshine if it goes east-west. Right? Just like a monoslope building. So there is a little bit of that going on, and I think that's the reason why. This is a northern latitude study. This is actually in Iowa. Yeah, Tom?
What period of time were those bales stored to come up with that 14%, do you know?
That was 7 months.
7 months.
Yeah, so very similar to what we would do at a farm.
Space between them, did you leave a space?
They do recommend space between them. Along the tour this week, we've talked about people that sometimes tie them together like here. It may have something to do with the direction of the slope. So now if we found the correct slope, so we're going east-west and the slope's north-south, then perhaps it doesn't matter as much. If it's a flat area, then maybe we want to spread it. Tom?
In my yard,
Yep,
the predominantly slopes to the south,
yep,
and so I have no choice but to put my bales, north and south, because water sets right in between all the bales.
right, yep.
And so, yeah,
Yep, okay. So some corrections would be if it slopes dramatically or in any shape, you may have to go back to the north-south
Yeah, because
just to allow the water to run away.
Exactly.
Yep, exactly, so, yes.
I was wondering on that, you know, when you talked about a shed or whatever, would that be considered a full barn type?
Yes, yeah, that was,
Sides and
with sides and everything, yeah, yeah.
Have they done any research on, you know, the hoops or any of this shed tops?
You know, the people that have done that research are actually the building folks, and there is no difference. The biggest difference is is the investment lower enough relative to a regular tin and lumber building to be able to offset it in 15, 20 years, in the lifetime of that building. So the answer is you can go down to really, really inexpensive structures. I will say this, I usually don't, I actually drove by their place yesterday. Farm Tech has a very nice website of buildings, including hoop type buildings. And the most inexpensive hay buildings, I didn't even want to put it up here, because you'd be laughing at me, they're under $10,000.
Do they have sides on them?
Because they're hoops, they come down a certain amount. And they may not be really tall, so you may have to buy, you know, extension. Now, think about it a little bit. Do you need storage for the entire 200 days of winter? No, because if it's nice, frozen, and sunny like it is, well, it hasn't been that way much this year. Wrong year to talk about it, right? So if we're really globally warming, then it's not going to be such a great thing. But I'm going to guess somewhere between, I don't know, November and November isn't the greatest, but it's almost in the middle of the winter that you can have bales that don't need to be stored, you know. But then as you move to the ends is when you have precipitation and mud and all that other stuff, so.
Would it make any sense to just do your high quality under the roof?
It would make a lot of sense to just do high quality. So lactation hay or late gestation hay, which is approaching those muddy times, that should probably be stored in a structure. So, but navigate the internet, there are some good buildings, and the interesting thing about Farm Tech is they put the price on it. Because it always says call, call. So I go, I'm not gonna call, because you're gonna tell me whatever you want to tell me. If it's on the internet, it's listed, then it's real, right? If it said the internet is true. And that's just the building, yes.
Stacking, do anything to look at stacking, non-stacking?
That's been discussed a lot on this tour, and I'm gonna share that the weights of your short of space, the recommendation is to put a bale, set it on the flat side, and roof it with one on the curb side. However, people have, as we talked to you guys through the tour this week, many of them have said all it does is ruin the bale at the bottom. Now, within our facility at the university, I can attest to that. Now, we do that with stocks bales, and about 50 to 80% of the bottom bale on stocks is useless. So you have a big old pile of junk at the end. I think the trend through the week has been keep them in a single row. So I'm sharing what we picked up through the week. If you read the research, they do that setup that we said, the flat side and then the round side on top, because supposedly it sheds. But the bottom line is I think it would have to be a heck of a well-packed bale to be on the bottom row, and then probably not stacked very long amount of time. Please don't do it with corn stalks, so you'll have a big pile of junk. Except for, there's people at the university trying to use corn stover for bioenergy, so maybe I'll sell and hold that pile of junk. So, other options would be to put a plastic tarp on top of bales that are placed on a pallet, maybe a gravel bed. The problem with the tarp is, will you replace it after you pull the bales for the day or the week or whatever? What happens with us is we try to put poly tarps on distillers grains truckloads, and we bought like 200 tarps over the years. in about 3 years. And the kids never replaced them, so they roll them back. And then pretty soon they blow away, they get all torn up, and there's mice everywhere. You know, because they make little channels and things in there, and it's all nice, full of distillers, and they love that. You know, and so you're not going to use the tarp on tarp. As you can tell here, orientation is about as important. And of course, anything that is protected fully, like a barn, or the poly cover, go down to about 2 to 3% waste or losses during storage. So I'll talk to you about a few experiments. Some of them are ours, some of them are from a different university, related to actually delivery of hay, delivery of energy supplements, and what impact that has on waste and on mineral intake for the remainder of the talk, and we'll conclude and chat a little bit about this. Because it creates a lot of discussion, because we think we figured out a way, and if you have and you feel it's pretty small waste, then continue doing it. So we'll share some of this and then get talking about that. So we had an experiment in Grand Rapids a few years back related to how we place the bale for the cows to consume hay. And so one of them was to actually roll the bale out like you can see here, and then cows will eat off of that. So its placement is on the ground with the hay unprocessed. Or put the unprocessed hay in a ring, just leave it as is, like you guys may do. Recognize that that's the ring, that's the experiment right there. So it's a poly ring on this particular study. Or you can grind the hay and put it in a bunk, or you can not grind it, but shred it and then lay it on the ground. So that's 4 treatments that we had. I'm going to focus on just placement. So did we put the hay in any type of structure versus did we not? So one is on the left side is if we just laid it on the pen surface, regardless of whether it was ground hay or long hay. And then on the right is going to be put into a ring or a bunk, and it would be ground or whole. So as you can tell from these numbers, and I'm going to concentrate mainly on the waste percentage from here out, so I don't want to waste time with the rest of it. I'll come back to one more point before I leave this slide. So when hay was placed in a structure, we only lost about 5% of the hay that was placed in there. When it was placed on the pen surface, it was about 19% loss. Okay? So the only thing I'm going to add to this, because I want you to remember these numbers, is the actual intake measured on these cows was about 1.9 to 2% of their body weight. So you have a 1,400 pound cow multiplied by 2, you got 28 pounds of intake. That's after all the waste and losses and all that other stuff, right? We'll come back to see those numbers time and again. And it's interesting how static, if you will, these cows are on intake. They don't vary very much. They're going to stay at that 2% unless something else is going on. Yes?
What was the weight of the cow, the average?
About 1450 in this case. So, so hay is the bottom line here is hay is to be fed in a structure. So then, if we say structure, what kind of structure should we be using, or what kind of hay ring, hay wagon, what should we be using? So we brought those same rings, as you can tell, back to Rosemount. This is now a summer experiment, as you can tell. And we're going to compare that because of this information that came out in 2003. I just want to tell you, the other slide had all the numbers, but let's not waste too much time on that. These 2 rings perform better than these 2 hay wagons, if you want to call them that, for lack of a better cradle, back in an experiment in 2003 in Michigan. The numbers were about 5% waste, kind of like what we had in a poly ring, against about 12%. So then we ran into Tom a few years back, and he's talked to you about the wagon that he has for cattle to be fed a diet through here. And so we talked about the possibility of working with him on this, and we had 2 experiments, one with dry cows and one with lactating cows, where we compared that poly ring that you saw on the previous slide against this wagon. to see how that would perform on cows in the summer in Rosemount. So now all of a sudden things change. The wagon is leading to less waste at about 1 pound per cow, about 6 pounds of waste out of the ring. Translate that to percentages, and it's 4% and then 22%. It's almost like we flip, but not quite flip. So we were expecting somewhere in the 4% range for the ring, right? That's what we had in Grand Rapids, and we went to 20. And then for the wagon, we probably, based on the Michigan data, we were probably expecting 12%, and we went to 4. That's what I'm referring to. So this begins to, and the only reason we want to talk about this is there's many factors, and so we can't just say, oh, this is the way that it's going to be, because there's more things playing into this than we can figure out. So there's a photo of the waste on the ring, right? And all my students hated those rings because they go, they're going to waste lots of hay. We'll come back to the reason why it looks so bad here. And this is Tom's wagon right there. That's the waste. So that's 24 hours of waste against 24 hours of waste. So you can tell the difference, right? And it's showed on the numbers. So then we go, okay, what about the lactating cows? We need to feed them a better diet, and it's going to be a mixture of hay and hay leach. We're going to grind it, put a TMR together, maybe a little mineral, you know, whatever, and it goes into a bunk, like a regular feedlot bunk. You can see it there. That's how we feed our cows. That's how we fed them this past year. Again, Tom's wagon. So now the TMR is going into that, and they're going to eat out of there. See what those numbers are? Again, about 1 pound of loss for the wagon against 4 pounds of loss out of the bunk, which translates to 5% waste on the wagon and about 18% on the bunk. And here is the photo of the lactating cow ration, whatever waste there was, 24 hours. And this is the waste out of the bunk. As you can tell, there's a lot of it pulled out. They've stomped it and they're not going to eat it. They've walked all over it, etc., etc. Yes?
Alfredo, just a question. Equal quality hay?
Yeah, it's exactly the same. In all of the experiments, we have to equalize everything.
All right.
In fact, you go, okay, here's the stack we're going to use, and you alternate, right? You go, this is for this is for this, and so on and so forth, so that that's not an issue. Shouldn't be, you know, and we have all the fiber measurements and that, but I don't want to trouble you with all of that, so. So here's a few considerations that come into play, because I've shown you differential results from here and that and there. It's almost like I've said, yes, I'm going to vote for the war, and I'm not going to vote for the war, or something like that. And you can make that reference to secretaries of state or whoever those would be. But anyway, so does the type of structure matter? Well, the space allowance probably has a lot to do with it. In the first set of studies that I shared with you, that was a 4,000 square foot allowance of space to the cows. That's a pretty nice area for them to walk around. In the second set, that was only 400 square feet, just because of design. That's where the bunk was, that's where we could measure it, etc., etc. So that's because of that. We allocated hay for 24 hours at the Grand Rapids State study. We allocated hay for 72 hours in the Rosemount study. Why? Because it's in a wagon. So we're gonna compare a wagon that needs to have a self-feeder type situation that can have a better capacity versus the ring, and that's the reason we use it every 2 hours. And then there's winter and there's summer, which can go against you if it's winter with very tight quarters. I guarantee you they're going to eat a lot, and you know this, right? So bottom line is there are some differentials. We're going to come back to the discussion on allocation and on hours as we get into a few more experiments here. So now let's assume you recognize that either you don't have enough hay or that the hay is not of the best quality. You're going to start feeding the lactating cows, so you need more energy. So you have to buy energy. So it's going to either be, in this set of studies, beet pulp against corn screen. Of course, they don't have the same energy content per pound. So you have to feed a little bit more beet pulp than you feed screenings. But everything else is fairly equal. So where do you put that energy supplement? Do you put them in tires, put it in a bunk, or do you lay it on the ground, right? Beet pulp in many parts of the northern part of the state, they just lay it on the ground. especially if it's a nice regular winter, nice, cold surface and stuff. The problem right away, and I'm sure you're all looking at it, because she's walking into it, right? They actually like to lay on. It's a very cold winter, and those cows, it ferments, so it warms up, so they just lay on it. They go, hey, we'll eat it and then lay on it, or vice versa. So it happened a lot. You'll see, of course, that this is going to be the greatest waste on supplement. So the next few slides speak about the impact of where we put the energy supplement. The hay, cows got hay in a ring, period. That did not get modified. Every treatment, and there's a bunch up there, had those cows eating out of a hay ring. What you see here in the next few slides is the impact of where we put the energy supplement on cow hay intake. So we're going to show waste or losses from hay that was placed in front of these cows. So lots of numbers, don't worry too much about that. Right here, if you take beet pulp against corn screenings, just overall, just say one versus the other, you will have greater waste of hay with beet pulp. Why? Because if you placed it in a bunk, those cows wasted about 18% of whatever was in the hay ring, right? I don't know why. Is there a weirdness because cows are eating in a bunk? Are they like waiting to get into the bunk because they probably didn't have enough capacity there to eat, so they're messing around with the hay? I don't know. When it was placed in a tire, they only lost 11%, or in a pen surface. Corn screenings obviously wasn't going to be placed on the pen surface, so it's about 11-12%. Back to the intake. Now what has happened is we fed them an energy supplement, so they're going to eat less hay, right? 1.6 to 1.8%. And that's because they were fed a moist supplement. When they were fed screenings, they're right back to the 1.92%. No impact on intake with the corn screenings, or hardly any impact. Getting into the actual impact on within beet pulp, if it was placed in those options, or within corn screenings, obviously we already talked about this. There will be a slight difference in intake when your corn screenings is fed in the bunk versus the tire. 2% against 1.9, and that difference was significant. But the most important difference is if beet pulp was placed in a bunk, there was this much waste compared with that much less waste over here on that number. So some interactions going on there. The last slide on this is cows that were never supplemented any energy. We just took a chance that they were not going to get any energy extra. We expected that those cows would make that up later, but we had to consider that option, and because that's what the experimentation is for. So on this slide, we can see that those cows wasted the least amount of hay, because all they had to eat was hay. And then consumption came to about 29 pounds, which is about 2% of their body weight as well. So supplementing energy to your cows will lead to more hay waste. You probably already knew that. Now where you place that energy supplement will have an impact, and what type of supplement will also have an impact. So a moist, a wetter supplement will lead to more hay waste than a drier supplement. That's what we're learning from this. And then placing it, the placement thing, it's a little goofy. Why placing a moist supplement in the bunk leads to more waste of hay? I can't tell you. I mean, you can sit and try and reason it. It has to do with behavior, but we did not have cameras out there to tell you what they were doing. Now we're moving on to the actual supplement. I'm going to try and make this real simple. There was no corn screenings waste, period. They ate it all. Okay, so it's a very effective, if you put corn out there for these cows in a cold winter, they're going to eat it, period. They're not going to mess around. When, obviously, we already saw the slide, when the beet pulp was placed on pen surface, we had 22% of waste. It's interesting that even in a tire or bunk, there was only 2% of waste on beet pulp. That's pretty darn good. So if you're thinking, I need to supplement energy, I'm going to use some sort of a wetter supplement, distiller's grains is an example for your area, you probably want to find a tire at least to lay it in. so that these cows don't get all over it. So here's an interesting set. The reason for this slide is to make you think more than to give you many answers. Number one, if cows are fed hay in a ring, and this is this bar here or this bar here, those are the two previous experiments, the impact on mineral intake out of a tub. So it's a mineral tub, no protein or low protein. All we're trying to do is get these cows to consume their mineral like you tried to do. Their intake was the least, and that's the reason I'm pointing to them. They consume, well, not so much here, but it's similar, from 0.9 to 1 pound of mineral supplement tub per cow. What does it say on the label that these cows should eat from just about any mineral tub that you've had? Right? 4 ounces. So we're about almost, what is that going to be? That's about 1/8 of this value, right? And because this is 16 ounces, right? Or 25% of that value, rather. So these cows, for whatever reason, are eating way more mineral supplement than they're supposed to be. And if you put certain tubs out there, I guarantee you have noticed this. Because you lay them out summer or winter, it doesn't matter, and you go, this should last them, if you do the math, it should last them 3 weeks. And then 1 week, wham, it's gone. What you do there decides a lot of things. I don't go back. I just say, hey, see ya. I'll see you in 2 weeks. And again, along the tour, we've had veterinarians, and we've talked to them about whether they're able to store some of that mineral in the liver, and they do. So they're able to utilize that. So don't worry too much about cutting them back a little bit. Now, 2 differences. Here, we fed them energy supplements. That's all the beet and bunks and all that other stuff. So when you feed an energy supplement, they will eat less mineral. Probably already figured that out. We're just showing you that. The part that I cannot answer is whenever you have hay that is not in a ring in the long form, cows are eating more mineral. I don't know why again. Do they take turns messing with the hay and messing with the tub? It's something that observation. To me, the most important part of this is they're eating too much mineral. You need to watch what your cows are doing at your place to determine whether you need to do something about that. So then we go back to Rose Mountain and we go, okay, can we manage this by axis? So if we limit the time cows have to eat at a bunk, can we manage waste again, reducing hay waste? So one of our colleagues had bought this feeder for some horse something she was working on. So then we stole this feeder and another feeder at about $3,500, but she wasn't going to use them anyway. And so they have a timer, and this curtain, which is like a very tough plastic, goes up and down. So when it's time to shut him out, the thing is down, and all these little wire holders keep a hot wire on top, so they can't reach over the top. And you can see it's exposed, right? So that's how we manage intake, and we would allow groups of cows either, I always forget the time, I think 6 hours, you'll see it in the next slide, 6 hours or 14 hours versus a 24-hour, which is that setup as we have seen before. Just a regular ring for 24 hours. So here's the data. They all differ significantly on the amount of intake. Let me see if I have anything. No, I guess I don't have it highlighted. So on a 6-hour treatment, those cows consumed 23 pounds, which came out to 1.6% of their body weight. There was no energy supplementation here. There was loose mineral, which we did not measure, so I don't have that data for you on the side for them. 14 hours or 24 hours, 14 hours came to 1.8% of their body weight. 24 hours, wham, back to the 2%, right? So we were talking from the beginning, 2% is a good number to use. But look at the waste. Hardly any waste on the 6-hour, 4% on the 14-hour, and 8% on the 24-hour. So we've made these cows, we trained them to eat little. Now the question you may have yourselves, you go, so did they lose weight, did we lose calves, nothing. They did not lose weight, they did well with calving, everything. This is a gestation study. So what I can do, playing around with numbers, it doesn't matter how I got to it, this is the caloric value or the energy. So similar to TDN, so it's roughly about 54% of TDN. Measured from, I took the sample to the lab and the lab told me this is what my hay has here. So then what I did is back calculator, if they didn't lose any weight, then they were maintained at the same rate, right? So they must have eaten this much calories. And I translated that and assigned it back to the lower intake, of course, of the cows that were restricted. So that came to 2 versus 187 versus 176. So look at this number actually. 187 is precisely what the book said at 14 hours of intake. If we go to 24 hours, we lose energy relative to what the book says, or not the book, but the lab. And if we restrict them further, we gain energy out of that. How do we gain it? It just sits there longer in the rumen, and the bugs go to work for it longer. They're able to take more energy out of it. Because once you put something in the rumen, it can either be digested or passed out. That's the only two choices, right? So if it passes out because of greater intake, then you can't get as much out of it. If it passes out slower because of lower intake, then it sits longer and you can get more energy out of it, and that's what's going on with that. So I'm actually going to go right to the end. Here's the things that affect hay waste: the structure, type of structure. You gotta have a structure. Can you use a wagon? Can you use a hay ring? It kind of will depend a little bit on your situation. We'll get Tom to share some ideas here in a little bit. What type of structure? The wagon design appears to influence hay waste. The ones that we saw from Michigan appear to be negative to waste. The ones that we tested in Minnesota, appears to actually hold waste to a lower value. I think this is about as critical as you want as structure and type, because it has to do with how much time does this cow have to play with feed. If you give her a lot of feed to play with or a lot of time, she will play with it, and you will lose more hay. So, larger surface area will reduce the interaction between the hay and the animal. Shorter feeder allowance, about fewer than 48 hours. We've heard all kinds of good ideas on this tour. People go, we're going to just have, say, a 24-foot wagon for 80 cows. If you go to some wagon manufacturers, they're going to say, oh, that's a no-no. That's only for 48 cows. Because they want whatever the ratio allowance of that. Or the next one is to reduce it down in time. And I showed you that big fancy device to get that done, but it could just be used. You leave from work, you stick them in, you come back from work, you stick them out. It's simple enough. Or, I was actually dreaming about this the other day. I thought, you could just have a little gate that's electrified, and that one is the one on a timer. So when the timer goes off, then the cows can go in and eat. And when it turns on, then they can't eat. And so hopefully they'll get used to that. I don't know. Just an idea, right? And then on the supplement end, you're going to need to feed energy now and then. You could probably go to dry if you want to preserve hay and the supplement. But in cases when we have a drought, now you want to preserve hay, right? So then moist supplements are more appropriate for that than wet supplements. Hopefully it's going to cost you one way or another, right? Because now consider yourselves in a drought. You don't have the hay or you don't have the quality. So you might as well just bite the bullet and say, well, I'm going to give him a wet supplement because it will reduce hay intake, but I'm going to have to pay for it because you have to pay for something rather than buying more hay at a more expensive proposition. And then you need to use a structure, a bunk or a tire would be the option with that. So we're going to turn that over for questions. We're happy to visit with you about it.
Down this